Spirituality is about how we find meaning, purpose, direction in the world, how we connect with ourselves, others, all that is, however we experience it. For some people, the majority in the world, it's God by some name like that or any other, some absolute, something beyond the beloved, so forth. Spirituality is that which helps us to feel connected to each other in the world, hopeful, to seek love, purposeful work, relationships. And there seem to be real benefits to it. And we can approach this by looking at a number of F words, 5 in fact. On balance, we can say that some people, if we look at all the various studies done on the connection between spirituality and well-being, on balance we can say that if you've got some form of spiritual practice, and I'll explain in a minute what those might be, some form of way of feeling connected to others in the world, you'll live longer, happier and healthier than someone who doesn't. And some studies by as much as 10 to 14 years. Why should this be? We describe ourselves as human beings. Perhaps a better phrase would be human belongings. It seems that connection, being at one with others and ourselves and the world, is really important to health and well-being. Let's look at these 5 Fs. First of all, faith. We know that people who have some form of faith live longer and happier and healthier lives than others, but there's no evidence of one faith in terms of religion over any other. Indeed, it might not be religion at all. It could be faith in football or politics. But you have some kind of belief system that gives you a sense of who I am, how I fit in with things. And often through that you meet with other people, you connect, you're part of a community and so on. The second F is fulfilling work. That we have something that we do which at the end of the day or night we feel I've earned enough to pay my way, it's given me satisfaction, so on and so forth. A third area is fellowship. That I have family, friends, people with whom I relate, I socialise with, I can talk to, I can share my difficulties and my joys with. And the fourth one is free giving. That in some way I am involved in the world in which I get situations where I give to others. Who was it who said it's better to give than to receive? If we look at the health benefits of that, some studies done on people in faith communities, they had high levels of health, but the healthiest in those communities were the ones who felt they were giving more to others than they were getting from it. So if we put those 4 Fs together, what we end up with a picture of is how important that sense of connectedness is to our health and well-being, and when we're disconnected, how we can become unhealthy. If you look at ancient studies on what did we do to try and punish people, we would exile them. And when you're exiled, you're cut off from people. You tend not to live very long. That idea of, if we look at studies done on loneliness, it's as dangerous as being overweight, heavy drinking and smoking. So something goes on in the nature of human consciousness that when we are in isolation, disconnected, cut off from others, that has a detrimental effect on our health and well-being. So, for example, many studies done on religion, religious people have said, oh, there you go, you need to be religious in order to be healthy. Ain't necessarily so. We can't say that from the studies. Because it may well be that what religions bring, groups of people getting together, opportunity to give and support one each other, so on and so forth, these could be the health benefits. So making some shift in our consciousness that moves us towards greater health, more feelings of okayness in the world. QED, if you want to make somebody sick, cut them off, make them feel alone. And I want to say something here briefly about connectedness, what connects us as human beings. if we seek connection by the common ground of our stories, that has limitations. So if I tell you my story of my interest in politics or my life of my childhood or art or schooling or something like that, or sport, at some point we'll separate, because your story isn't the same as mine, because we might disagree on our aspect of politics, even if we support the same one, or sport, even if we support the same team, whatever. We disconnect, we separate. But if through hearing my story, and this is one of the exercises that works well in cultivating heartfulness, if through hearing each other's stories, we hear in that story your times of being happy, sad, sorrowful, hurt, so on and so forth, then I don't share exactly the same story as you, but I know what it is to be happy, sad, loving, joyful, etc. The feeling is the common ground. And I'm not talking about mere sentimentality. I'm talking about that gives us very meaning, very a deep sense of connection at the heart level. There's a fifth F, which in some respects subverts the well-being benefits of the other four Fs, and that's fear. To some extent, there's always a low level of anxiety going on in us as human beings, heightened when we're in danger or we're sick or we're distressed in some way. When the adrenaline kicks in, the blood pressure rises, and so on and so forth. That's a perfectly normal human function. Arguably, you could say that human beings now, because of the intense pace of life, the communications, the density of population, city living, etc., is all raising that low level of background anxiety. And arguably that could be one reason why so many people, either through new age or old age belief systems, are looking to find peace and harmony in the world. That's one of the undercurrent demands in the process of seeking to come home, is trying to find that place in ourselves where we feel essentially okay and at one with ourselves and all that is. Now, the fifth F word, fear, has a profound significance in our sense of well-being. And that's been supported by studies in the field of what's known as psychoneuroimmunology, PNI. And it goes something like this, that if we are anxious, even long-term low-level anxiety, what it tends to do is create a suppressive effect upon the immune system. The production of white cells, antigens, and all those kind of things that keep us healthy. So the paradox is, when you're anxious and scared, you're more likely to get sick, or if sick, to become sicker. What seems to happen is, if you can cut into that level of anxiety by creating environments, situations in which I feel more okay. So if I'm a patient in hospital and I've been told I've got cancer, but if I feel I can trust my carers, if I feel there's a future, if I know what's going on with me, and so on and so forth, my fear level can diminish. If I'm in an unhappy family at home and it's dysfunctional, it's causing anxiety, if some family therapy comes in and makes the family happier, the anxiety level goes down, and so on and so forth. In countless situations, we can create relationships through trust, support, nurturance, loving nature, and so forth, that diminish the anxiety. When that happens, if the anxiety level starts to fall, the brakes come off the immune system and it can kick in and function more fully, so that we, by feeling better, we get to actually get better, or if dying, to die better. So there's a direct correlation in the subject of PNI between how we feel and how we actually are. So, for example, with the heartfulness processes, the teachings that come through that, through the meditations, the insight work, and so on and so forth. If a person comes to feel less fearful in the world, for example, by opening up to all that is, I begin to feel more okay about me. I have less anxiety, QED, I have less anxiety, and maybe less likely to get sick. So the spiritual quest, that personal insight work, the heartfulness, has a direct correlation with our sense of health and well-being. So, for example, the inner critic that we've explored lives on fear. That's the way it operates, keeps us in our place. And if we learn to diminish its impact, if we learn not to be governed by it quite so much, there's less fear about us. If there's less fear about us, we open up then to the greater potential of love, because love and fear are the only two great forces at work in the world, the polar opposites. Everything else is graded in between. And the more loving we become of ourselves and others, paradoxically, the chances are we're likely to live healthier and happier than we are without it. One of the things that we learn through practices like heartfulness meditation is that it cultivates a different way of thinking and feeling about ourselves, where we're less governed by fear-driven thoughts and so on. So, for example, if I have a constant thought that I am unworthy, and I've grown up with that and live with it, and it creates drives in me to always want to be worthy or to get the world or parents or loved ones to approve of me. If I come to discover through heartfulness that I am fundamentally worthy and lovable as I am, to God, to universe, whatever, then that's a counterpoint to the voice of the inner critic. And the curious thing is, even the brain actually changes to accommodate these new thought patterns. It's like the brain says, you have a constant thought of I'm unworthy, so the brain says this must be a very important thought, so I'll protect it with lots of structure. I'll lay it down like a motorway inside in the brain structure to make sure that this thing is ready and always operational. A bit like creating a three-lane motorway out of a little bypass. And so it becomes a very strong and well-protected thought. And if you then start to create another thought that says, actually, no, you're worthy and lovable as you are, through meditations, through group work, through whatever it might be, and that lie of the inner critic is subverted and exposed for what it is, and instead a new thought and feeling begin to emerge that I'm worthy and lovable as I am, I'm worthy and lovable to others, to God, or whatever, then the brain begins to say, it's almost like it's saying, this must be a really new and important thought, and I better protect this one and look after it. So the structure of the brain actually seems to begin to shift to strengthen this new thought pattern. And because the brain's very efficient, strips away from the old negative thought pattern and uses that material like the myelin to build up this and strengthen it. So the curious thing is, we see a demonstration there of our physical body is actually affected by our emotional body, which is affected by our spiritual body, if you see what I mean. Those things are all connected. So the paradox is there can be actually physical changes in the body as a result of psychological, spiritual changes that have taken place, because new patterns get set up. And that is also hopeful because it breaks away from the notion that I'm stuck with who I am and that's it till the end. Actually, no, we're not. We can shift, we can transform, and it may even change, for example, the very way our brain is structured and functions. So if you look at what spirituality brings, can feed, an absence of it can feed a kind of nihilism that I'm here, I'm going to make the best of it, this is all there is, I'm born, I live, you die. And if, in the words of that song by Peggy Lee, a kind of consciousness we live with, which is, if that's all there is, if that's all there is, let's break out the booze and let's keep dancing if that's all there is, as Peggy Lee sang. Which is a kind of a really low-level nihilistic quality to it. through that heartfulness, through that awakening to I am more than who I think I am, I'm more than who I've been told I am, and that my essential nature is loved and loving, is compassionate, is worthy of it, and is able to be a channel for it to the world without straining and stressing me and burning me out. We begin to discover an authentic specialness, not an ego-driven specialness. And I'm mindful here of a conversation with someone who was on a particular spiritual path, whose response was, it makes me realise how incredibly insignificant we are. When you look at the mightiest of the universe, why bother with human beings? Because there's nothing much to us, really. You know, we're born, we live, we die, and that's the end of it. And my response was, that's not true. Because in that conversation with that person, I said, as far as I know, I'm the only me that's ever been, and you're the only you that's ever been. And there's never been one before, and there'll never be one again, and there's never been a me before, never. In the 4.5 billion year history of this planet, of the planets zooming around this particular solar system, of the solar system that's part of 1 million other solar systems in this galaxy, part of 1 billion galaxies of 1 billion solar systems, and zillions of planets, and possibly even many billions of universes. As far as we know, I'm a one-off, you're a one-off. And that, to me, makes us incredibly special. We are so important that our uniqueness, our specialness is awe-inspiring. It encourages us to think, wow, you know, there must be something really special about me. There must be some reason for my being here. There must, even if only simply to appreciate being here. So it lifts us out of that very almost self-destructive, limited, ego-driven, smaller world into a grander perspective of who we are, and discovering that more fully. And through that, spirituality makes us realize how special we are. Special indeed.